And I'll repeat all the questions just so everybody can hear it. The question was basically, what can we do as a state to push back against the over-regulation, not only on the coal industry, but the banking industry? And I literally had conversations on both those fronts, on both the coal front and the banking front, literally as I was walking in here. And indeed, I was at the First Source Summit back in the end of 2013. And there was conversations had on many fronts about how we as communities, how as a state, how as different parties, we can work together to ensure that as Kentuckians, and Eastern Kentuckians in particular, we are the best version of ourselves we could be. I was asked at that meeting by somebody, what could I do as an elected official, what would I do to help the people of Eastern Kentucky? And what I said at that time is an answer in partial measure to your question. I said, let's bear in mind the fact that we're broke. We have the second worst credit rating in America. Only Illinois has a worse credit rating as a state than we do. We're the 6th least solvent state. So we're broke. So given the fact that we're broke, no matter what we think of, if we can't afford to pay for it, what good does it do? What I asked that reporter, I said, listen, think about this. It's not a function of what can the government do for Eastern Kentucky. It's what can the government stop doing to the people of Eastern Kentucky. And this is where it comes down to regulation. The 10th Amendment is very specific. It says that those powers not given to the federal government are the responsibility of the states and of the people. That's us. That's right here. And as it relates to these latest edicts, we were talking about President Obama and how he has basically decided to bypass the rule of law, bypass the legislature, bypass the Congress, and just simply bring his edicts down and tell people this is how it's going to be. That's not acceptable to me. And as a state, and as a governor of a state, I will not comply. Not only will I not submit a plan for the reduction of CO2 emissions or any of this other nonsense as it relates to navigable waterways or any of the rest of it. There is no legally binding reason why we need to do this. We are a nation of law. I'm a believer in living under the law, whether I agree with the law or not, finding ways to treat everybody equally and fairly under the law. But nonetheless, if it is not a legally binding mandate, we don't have to comply. And if more states stood on that law, which is the law of the land, the Constitution of the United States, we would not have this kind of malarkey. And if states banded together, the EPA has no recourse other than fines and threats and use of federal dollars to bribe us to do things not in our best interest. That needs to end. And I would say to the EPA, as it relates to the coal regs and things and the CO2 emissions and the whole 9 yards, keep your suggestions, keep your federal dollars, and pound sand. Literally, we don't need that kind of intrusion into this state. It's not as simple. I want you to understand, I don't assume that there's a magic wand that you come to office with. But a little leadership goes a long way. It really does. And if you had a little spine, and there's not a lot of it in elected office, there's pockets of it, but not enough. If you had a little spine in the form of a governor has a bully pulpit that, if used properly, can change the direction of a state. This is my approach. Maybe it's because I'm a country kid. Maybe it's because I was raised with common sense. But I firmly believe that we can stand on the rule of law. It'll get tried in court. So be it. But over the last 150 years, there's a lot of case law that shows that when these things have been tried, the state comes out on top. Because that is still the law of the land. Other questions on anything? You mentioned finance too. Dodd-Frank is suffocating the banking industry. It's unbelievable. We're literally crushing the inability of local bankers now to actually do what they were designed to do. They can't even lend money in these communities to the very people who need them. Frankly, about the only people that can get money easily these days are the people who don't need it, which kind of defeats the purpose. It really does. Other questions on anything?